Before the world learned her name, before the cameras came, before America was forced to look at itself in the mirror, one black woman stood alone on a platform built on silence. But the moment she whispered, "I refuse to move," the entire nation felt the ground shake. America has always loved to brag about fairness, about opportunity, about equality. But for the black community, those words often feel like decorations. Nice to look at, but hollow when tapped. And on the morning of September 14th, in a quiet suburb of Dallas, Texas, those hollow promises collided with a woman named Naomi Brooks, a 32-year-old middle school English teacher, a mentor loved by hundreds of students, and a woman raised to believe that dignity is something you never negotiate. That morning would start like any other, but it would end with headlines, hashtags, nationwide protests, and the fall of a system that believed it could silence people like her. And everything began on a bus. The sun had barely risen when Naomi stepped onto the Blue Star Transit line bus 47, a route she had taken for 6 years. Same route, same seat, same routine. But on that day, something was different. The bus was unusually crowded, humming with the quiet fatigue of commuters heading toward downtown. Naomi wore her usual calm expression, carrying a canvas bag filled with graded assignments. She found a seat near the middle, close to the window, where the early morning light touched her cheek. A few minutes later, a man boarded, a white man in a business suit, carrying the smugness of someone used to getting his way. He scanned the seats, stopped, pointed at Naomi. "You," he said sharply. "Move. That's my spot." She blinked, confused. "Sir, this seat isn't reserved." "It is for me," he barked. "I sit here every morning." The bus grew quiet. Everyone turned. Some eyes filled with sympathy. Others are filled with expectation. Naomi straightened. "I paid for this ride. I'm not moving." The man scoffed. "You people never know your place." Those words, "you people," landed like stones skipping across her chest. Naomi took a breath. She had heard versions of that phrase her entire life. She thought of her grandmother in Alabama, forced to sit in the colored section. She thought of her father, pulled over twice a month for routine checks. She thought of the black students she taught, who were already learning how to shrink themselves so the world didn't see them as a threat. "No," she said. "I'm staying." The driver made a call. And by the time the bus stopped at the next station, 3 transit officers stepped in. What happened next would ignite the biggest civil rights case in Dallas in 2 decades. One of the officers stepped forward, arms crossed. "Ma'am, we need you to vacate the seat." Naomi held her ground. "With respect, officer, I haven't done anything wrong." The white man behind them folded his arms smugly. "She's refusing to cooperate. Remove her. Some of us have real jobs to get to." A few passengers muttered in agreement. The officer leaned closer. "Ma'am, if you don't move, you'll be removed from the bus." Naomi swallowed. She wasn't loud. She wasn't angry. She simply said, "I paid for this ride, and I deserve the same respect as every person on this bus." The officer didn't like that answer. Within seconds, he grabbed her arm. Gasps filled the bus. Students from her school, who happened to be riding, started crying. One shouted, "Leave Miss Brooks alone." Another pulled out a phone and hit record. The officer yanked again. Naomi winced but didn't fight back. Because deep down she knew, sometimes fighting isn't raising your voice, it's refusing to lower your dignity. They dragged her off the bus. Her canvas bag spilled across the steps. Papers fluttered into the street like broken wings. The last thing she saw before the bus doors shut was the eyes of her students. Wide, terrified, and forever changed. And the worst part? The man who wanted her seat sat down with a satisfied grin. By noon, the video had spread across social media like wildfire. Hashtags formed. Outrage erupted. Millions of people watched a black woman being dragged for staying in the seat she paid for. The caption read, "She didn't resist. She simply refused to move." Her name became a rallying cry. Stand with Naomi, we sit together, dignity is not optional. But for Naomi, she sat alone in a holding room at a small transit station, her wrists marked from the officer's grip. A young black officer entered quietly. He whispered, "Ms. Brooks, your video has gone viral. Half the city is outside." She blinked. "What?" He nodded, eyes soft. "You're not alone anymore." Outside, thousands had gathered. Teachers, students, activists, parents, elderly folks who had marched in the 60s. People from every race, locked together in solidarity. And at the front of the crowd stood Jordan Pierce, a civil rights attorney known for winning impossible cases. He wasn't there to negotiate. He was there to fight. That night, Naomi sat across from Jordan Pierce in a small office filled with case files. Jordan placed a folder on the table. "Naomi, I need to show you something." Inside were documents about the Blue Star Transit line. Dozens of filed complaints. All from black passengers. All ignored. All marked insufficient evidence. One stood out. The passenger requested to move to accommodate a white patron. Declined. Removed by officers. No fault assigned. Naomi stared at it. "Why didn't anyone stop them?" she whispered. Jordan leaned forward. "Because the system wasn't broken, Naomi. It was working exactly as it was designed to." She closed her eyes. Not out of fear, but because she understood exactly what she was fighting now. Not a man. Not a seat. But a pattern. A culture. A history that had repeated itself long enough. Jordan placed his hand over hers and said quietly, "You didn't just stand up for yourself today. You stood up for everyone who never got the chance." Naomi breathed deeply. "Then let's take this all the way." Jordan nodded. "We will." By dawn the next morning, Dallas was transformed. News vans lined the streets. Reporters broadcast live from outside the Blue Star Transit headquarters. Protesters held signs. "Dignity is a right." "Naomi Brooks, we see you." "Racism is not a misunderstanding." Inside her apartment, Naomi sat on her couch wearing an oversized hoodie. Her phone buzzed non-stop. Messages from students, parents, church members, strangers from across the nation. But one call made her freeze. "Naomi, it's Mom." Her mother's voice cracked with emotion. "I saw the video. Baby, are you okay?" Naomi swallowed. She had always been the strong one. The one who didn't cry. But hearing her mother's voice broke something open. I'm trying," she whispered. "Oh, baby," her mother said gently. "You didn't do anything wrong. You hear me? You didn't do anything wrong." Tears slid down Naomi's cheeks. But behind the tears was a fire. Her mother continued. "You come from a line of women who stood when they were told to kneel. Don't let them dim that light." And Naomi made a silent promise. "I won't. Not anymore." That afternoon, the Blue Star Transit Board held an emergency press conference. Their spokesperson stepped up to the mic. "The incident involving Ms. Brooks appears to be a misunderstanding." The crowd booed loudly. "And we will be conducting an internal review too." A reporter cut him off. "Is it true your officers have a pattern of removing black passengers at the request of white riders?" He froze. Another reporter shouted. "Why were previous complaints dismissed?" Another. "Why was Ms. Brooks arrested instead of the man who harassed her?" The spokesperson stuttered through weak answers. But the world wasn't buying excuses anymore. The press conference became a disaster, and the board realized Naomi wasn't just a story. She was a movement. And movements don't disappear when the cameras turn off. That night, Jordan met Naomi at her mother's house, the place she always went when she needed grounding. Her mother had cooked an entire table of food. Collard greens, cornbread, fried chicken, black-eyed peas. As they ate, Naomi's mother, Laverne Brooks, told Jordan, "You know, this isn't new. When I was Naomi's age, I was forced off a bus in Montgomery. They didn't drag me, but they made sure I knew I wasn't welcome." Jordan leaned in. "What happened afterward?" Laverne sighed. "Nothing. Back then, there were no cameras. No hashtags. Just shame you had to swallow quietly." Naomi looked at her mother, stunned. "You never told me that." Laverne smiled softly. "There are some wounds a mother doesn't want to pass on to her child." Jordan placed a folder on the table. "Mrs. Brooks, that ends now." Inside were photos and documents, decades of civil rights cases, including the historic ones Naomi had taught in her classroom. Brown versus Board, Montgomery bus boycott, Freedom Riders, Selma, the Civil Rights Act. Jordan looked at Naomi. "They fought the same fight. Your story is part of theirs now." Naomi felt chills roll through her entire body. Because she realized, this moment wasn't accidental. It was inherited. 2 days later, an enormous crowd gathered in front of City Hall. It was the largest demonstration Dallas had seen in 20 years. Thousands of people, black, white, Latino, Asian, young, old, stood shoulder to shoulder. At the front stood Naomi. Not as a victim, but as a leader. The mayor stepped onto the stage, adjusting the microphone. "Ms. Brooks, the city owes you an apology." Naomi didn't move. She simply said, "The apology doesn't belong to me. It belongs to every black person who's been silenced. Every one of us who's been told to move, to wait, to shrink, or to disappear." The crowd erupted. She raised her hand. "And I won't accept empty words." The mayor blinked. She continued, "We need reforms. Real ones. not slogans. Her voice trembled, but not with fear. With conviction. The mayor forced a smile. We will look into it. Naomi leaned forward. No. You'll do something about it. The crowd roared. And that was the moment the mayor realized. He wasn't controlling this narrative anymore. Naomi was. That evening, Jordan revealed something that would change the entire case. He placed a stack of internal Blue Star documents on the table. Found them through a whistleblower, he said. Naomi flipped through them. Her hands shook. Because of what she read was worse than anything she imagined. A private group chat among transit supervisors titled, Seat Management Policies. Inside were messages. Keep them toward the back if possible. The front of the bus looks bad for PR. If white riders complain, adjust seating manually. Urban riders equals keep eyes open. Don't escalate unless they resist. Jordan's voice hardened. Naomi, this wasn't about one man wanting a seat. This was a system designed to humiliate your community. Naomi swallowed hard. Jordan, we have to expose this. He nodded. And we will. Later that night, Naomi received an anonymous email. Subject, stop or else. The message inside read, You've stirred up enough trouble. Drop the case or your career, your reputation, and your safety will be at risk. This is bigger than you. Walk away. Naomi's hands trembled. For the first time, fear crept in. But then she remembered her students, the ones who cried as they watched her being dragged away. She remembered her mother's story. She remembered every you people, every side glance, every humiliation she had swallowed quietly for years. She took a breath, then typed a simple reply. I won't walk away, and hit send. The courthouse was packed. News cameras lined the sidewalks. Protesters filled the lawn. People waved signs with her name on them. Inside, Naomi took the stand. Her voice never wavered. She described the bus, the man, the officers, the pain, the humiliation, the fear. But she also described something else. Hope. Hope that her students would grow up in a world where fairness wasn't optional. Hope that her story would break the cycle her mother endured. I hope that people will finally listen. When the recording of the bus incident played in the courtroom, grown men cried. Laverne Brooks covered her mouth as tears slid down her cheeks. The prosecutor turned to the jury. Is this the America we want to be? The courtroom fell silent. Everyone knew the answer. The courtroom atmosphere was electric. You could feel the tension in the air, the way you feel the heaviness before a thunderstorm. Blue Star Transit executives sat at the defense table, stiff and sweating. The white man who demanded Naomi's seat avoided eye contact the entire time. When the final witness stepped down, the judge looked at the jurors. You may begin deliberation. The jury left. Minutes passed. Then an hour. Then 2. Naomi sat quietly, fingers intertwined, heart pounding. Her mother whispered, Whatever happens, you've already changed history. But deep down, Naomi knew the verdict mattered not just for her, but for everyone who had ever been told to move, to shrink, to step aside. After 3 long hours, the jury filed back in. The 4-person stood. We, the jury, find the Blue Star Transit Company guilty of racial discrimination, abuse of authority, and violation of civil rights. A collective gasp filled the room. Some people shouted in joy. Others burst into tears. Naomi covered her mouth as tears streamed down her face. But then came something no one expected. The 4-person added, We also recommend mandatory federal oversight and full restitution to affected passengers. The courtroom erupted. This wasn't just a victory. It was a precedent. A message. A shift. Blue Star Transit executives were forced to resign. The man who demanded Naomi's seat had his name revealed publicly. His company dropped him. His board removed him. His political donors fled. He issued a thin apology, but it was too late. The nation had already chosen its side. And that side was Naomi's. The Department of Transportation launched a nationwide audit into discriminatory transit practices. For major cities began rewriting their transit codes. Activists cheered. Families marched. Teachers cried. And all across America, something began to sprout, something that had been buried for too long. Hope. Months later, Naomi stood backstage at a massive auditorium in Washington, D.C. Thousands filled the seats. The air buzzed with anticipation. Jordan Pierce stood beside her, adjusting his tie. Are you nervous? He asked. Naomi laughed softly. A little. You should be. It's every day someone gets honored by the National Civil Rights Council. She smiled. I didn't do anything extraordinary. Jordan looked at her, eyes full of sincerity. You refused to move. Many people are beaten, threatened, fired, before they even dare to say no. He reached out and squeezed her hand. You didn't just sit on a bus, Naomi. You made the entire country stand. A stagehand whispered, You're next. Naomi walked out under the blazing lights. The crowd exploded into applause as she approached the podium. She looked out at the sea of faces, black, white, brown, every color, and felt something powerful wash over her. Not fear, not pride, but purpose. She took a breath and began. I was dragged off a bus because someone believed their comfort was more important than my dignity. But today, I stand here because millions of people refused to let that be the end of the story. The room was silent. You know what hurt the most? She continued. Not the officer's grip. Not the humiliation. Not even the fear. She paused, voice trembling. What hurt the most was the thought of my students watching and learning the wrong lesson. The lesson that they should stay quiet, stay small, stay seated. Naomi wiped a tear. But you've taught them something else. You've shown them that when one of us stands, we all rise. People in the audience stood. Clapped. I cried. Her next words would echo across the internet within hours. We cannot build a better America by asking the oppressed to move. We build it by moving the systems that oppress them. The auditorium erupted. A standing ovation lasting nearly 2 minutes. That night, Naomi returned home. Her apartment was quiet. She sat on the edge of her bed, letting the silence settle around her. Her phone buzzed. It was a video message from her students. They were gathered in her classroom, holding handmade signs. Thank you, Ms. Brooks. You showed us we matter. We're proud of you. The last student, a shy girl named Deja, said. I used to sit at the back of the bus because I felt like that's where people like me belonged. But now, I sit wherever I want. Because you taught me I'm enough. Naomi covered her face as tears flowed freely. This was the real victory. Not the courtroom. Not the headlines. Not the award. But the hearts that refused to shrink anymore. The next morning, Naomi Brooks returned to her classroom. The children rushed her with hugs and cheers. And as she stood before them, chalk in hand, she realized. She wasn't just teaching English. She was teaching courage. And courage, once learned, is never forgotten. That evening, Naomi walked to the bus stop. She stepped aboard bus 47. The driver smiled warmly. Good evening, Ms. Brooks. Your seat is right where you left it. Naomi walked down the aisle. Every passenger turned and watched her. Not with superiority. Not with suspicion. But with respect. She sat in the exact seat where everything began. Closed her eyes. And whispered. I didn't move, and because of that, the world did. And so, Naomi Brooks became a symbol. Not because she shouted, not because she fought with violence, but because she refused to shrink. Her story teaches us something America still struggles to learn. Respect is not a privilege. It is a right. And when one person stands for that right, millions find the strength to rise. If Naomi's story touched your heart, if it opened your eyes, if it reminded you that dignity should never be negotiable, please like this video, comment. I stand with Naomi. Share this story with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to help this channel reach 5,000 subscribers. Your support helps us bring more powerful stories like this to life.